Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Anderson, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumnae Relations. Before we begin today's session, please note that there will be time for questions towards the end of the presentation. So if you have anything to ask Nate, please click the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. Please note that you may need to exit out of full screen view in order to see the Ask a Question button. This session will be recorded and posted on our Alum Learning Consortium's past event recordings page in 3 to 5 business days. Now, please welcome our moderator for today's session, Kathy Hansen, Vice President of Institutional Advancement.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you and welcome to all of you who are joining us this evening for this St. Ben's at Home episode. We're really pleased to be joined tonight by Nate Dehne, who is our Vice President for Enrollment Management and Marketing. Just a reminder, we were inspired to create the St. Ben's at Home series back as things started closing down. We were spending more time at home, practicing a lot of social distancing, and we thought that within that climate, we wanted to be able to reach out to you to share about news about what's happening on campus, to tell stories of what our Bennies are up to share information and speak to our plans for the future, and probably most importantly of all, to remind everyone once again that the Bennie network is alive and well. So thank you for being a part of this series. There is a lot going on in enrollment management these days, and we have a lot to cover tonight during this conversation. So I'm just going to jump in and start with some questions. Okay, Nate?
Sounds great.
Good. So it really has been an extraordinary few months, and I'm guessing probably months unlike any that you've experienced in your professional career. The work of enrollment management, I know looks quite different now than it has before. So we'll talk about the influence and the effect of the pandemic later on in this conversation. But first, I wanted to kind of turn our attention to the anti-racist protests that are going on across the country, and the increasing calls for colleges and universities to really step up and take stronger action to create a more just and equitable society. So in that context, I wonder, how is that affecting the women and the families that you're talking to about coming to about St. Ben's? And is our work in enrollment changing at all because of that?
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want to say hello to Bennie Nation. It's an honor and a privilege always to be around the Bennies and to share time with you. So my heartfelt hello to all of you tonight. The question and the answer to the question, Kathy, is they're watching. They're watching for how we're going to respond both directly and indirectly to these calls for social justice and equity, and I think addressing decades and decades and decades of injustice. And I think, from an admissions standpoint, I've really myself thought a lot about my own personal feelings and reaction to everything that's going on. And, I think as it relates to admissions, myself and our teams really sit at the front door of who we ask to be part of our community from a student perspective. And I think having us in admissions set the expectations for our incoming students and families on what we believe and stand firm in, we need to do much more intentionality around that. Okay. We talk a lot about community. We talk about the strength of our community. So, we need to make sure that we're expressing that. And while it might take more time to make strides outside of St. Ben's, within our community, I think we hold great power to be able to affect change and take action. So, exactly. But they're watching.
Well, they're watching, and I know they expect us to be honest and straightforward and have integrity in the messages that we're sending. So we can't whitewash anything. We can be honest about what we're about and the problems, the challenges that we have and what we're doing to correct it. So I think kind of authenticity and how we speak about this is really important in every kind of communication, but certainly with enrollment and talking with prospective students.
Agreed.
You know, this also, I think, relates very much to the changing demographics, you know, in our country, in Minnesota, and you know, how that's affecting enrollment, and maybe especially at small private liberal arts colleges like St. Ben's. So I'm wondering what changes are we making at St. Ben's, or do we need to make in order to ensure that women from every background can not only enroll at St. Ben's, but in fact thrive and become the fullest expression of who they are? What do we need to be doing?
Yeah, you know, I think you know, and we started a lot of this work, but you know, re-examining the question of who we are now and who we are striving to be as an institution. That's a key question that continues to come up in our strategic planning meetings, in our leadership team meetings, things along those lines, and you know, our marketing messaging and the web, as you know, overall, but also as it relates to a more diverse incoming class. I mean, it dovetails exactly into that first question, is that, you know, our marketing materials, our website, it's not just about posting a picture and saying we celebrate diversity. We're way beyond that point. So, you know, accurately defining what we are as a community and what we are striving to be, being honest about that, forthright, sharing, and setting expectations, continuing to do that. Our programming, looking at our academic programs that we offer, both academically and co-curricular wise, to help drive enrollment and bring students in. I think this pandemic has shown that we have the ability to deliver our education in an online format. Well, what opportunities does that lend to accentuate our on-campus experience? You know, are there postgraduate opportunities online or graduate programs online? Our pricing and our price point. You know, we're not inexpensive as an institution, and you know, how do we address you know, the right price point and setting price for ongoing years once students enroll, and things like, you know, the great work and great support of our alum network and the Illuminating Lives campaign with scholarship funding and things have just been so welcomed and overwhelming, and we're so appreciative and admission of the work, Kathy, of you and your team, of the alums supporting the institution. So, I mean, these are some of the many questions, but they center a lot around those facts.
Absolutely. And I mean, I thank you for mentioning the support of the alums and our donors and other friends in the Illuminating Lives campaign. Scholarship support was the #1 priority in that. And I'll tell you, we've had a very successful campaign, but we are not done. We are nowhere near where we need to be in terms of providing financial aid for our students. We'll dig into the financial aid question in a little bit, but I want to kind of drill down, as you know, you've talked more generally about how things are changing in enrollment work at St. Ben's. Let's take a look more closely at this particular fall's entering class, the class of 24. So as you've talked with students, prospective students, and their parents, what are they telling you, and how is COVID-19 weighing in on their decision making about attending college or attending St. Ben's, but even attending college anywhere? How's that working, and what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, we're hearing primarily that you know, our incoming families are really excited about the fact that we intend to have an on-campus experience in the fall. It's a pillar of our, for lack of a better term, sales pitch. You know, again, we all know the importance of the St. Ben's community. So being able to offer that, or at least be intending to be a residential in-person academic experience, is really important to families. But right now, once that announcement really has been made, very quickly on the heels of that is, okay, well, how will it look? We know it's going to be different, but how is that going to look? What is that experience going to look like? So,
to follow up on that, before Nate, before we go on to something else, We spoke with Richard Ice a few weeks ago, and he just mentioned kind of moving to a block schedule for class. Can you, just as a reminder, can you kind of describe that and how it's beneficial for students and maybe been helpful in your student recruitment?
Yeah, so 4 blocks in a semester. Each block would be 1 class. So students would take 1 class in each of those blocks for about 3.5, 4 weeks, kind of like J-term. Many of our alums will remember J-term. So what it allows us to do, and we're seeing the importance, I think, of making this shift, it allows us to pivot quickly if we need to, either individually, where maybe there's a student not feeling well and that student needs to take that class online, or, again, heaven forbid, we're in a situation where I need to pivot to all online. We're able to do that. Keeps our students kind of at a little bit of a more distance, the movement between campuses. So a lot of those factors, but most importantly, for example, our international students, there's some concern right now about their ability to make it into country on time and get visas. Well, if we need to do an online class for international students in that first block, we're able to do that and then have them join in person second block. So
because the classes will be taught in a hybrid kind of way, so partially online and partially in person. So it does give individual students flexibility as well as the
right. Yep. And families, I've had many conversations individually with families about this and explaining that, it seems to resonate. Again, there are some where, maybe it doesn't as much right now. It's just different, and different is hard. But again, the faculty have been amazing in, researching this, giving it the thought, responding to families with us in admission. It's been really, really helpful. So again, now it just transitions to helping students and families understand how it's going to be different. But being together and being part of the community and in community, it was really a major step for us, and we're excited to be able to have that. And again, the great work of faculty, student development and things, and the work that they're doing to keep students safe. And too, Kathy, I lean into the fact that I'll be sending one of my own children back to St. Ben's in the fall. So as a family, we've had many conversations around the table about being safe. And I think my wife and I both feel like, the institution is doing what it can to keep her safe. And that's important.
And we've got fallback plans, if we need to pivot to plan B, C, D, E, whatever, we can do that. Thank you for that kind of sketch of what campus will look like this fall. Sure. This is the question I know that every single person asks you probably every time they run into you, right? And it's, what do you think fall enrollment's going to look like? And I know you need a crystal ball for that, but what's your best judgment on that right now?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing right now is our traditional enrollment, especially out of state traditional enrollment, is down a little bit, international and out of state for traditional students. But we have already surpassed our result last year in transfer students, and we're just really entering into the heart of transfer season. So that's a very good sign. There's still a lot of good activity, and will continue to be in the next couple of months. Our returning student numbers actually look really, really strong. So, again, the mix is going to look a little bit different. We'll be a little smaller because we did graduate a larger class than we would be bringing in. But there were some different scenario planning, a few months ago where the picture looked a lot different. But again, with the great work of our admissions team, and I can't thank them enough. I mean, I asked them to go above and beyond on numerous occasions, and they've answered the bell every time. And I know there's a few alums that are in our office that are listening in today. One in particular, our Dean of Admission, Karen Bennie. And she's been amazing as far as my right arm and really helping address these tough questions and digging in on the things that we're doing. So, but it goes beyond admissions. I mean, Cathy, you and your team, faculty, staff. I mean,
everybody. We're all in student recruitment and retention. We know
that's right. That's right.
I want to go back to the comment you made about transfer students and the fact that we're kind of unusually high. I mean, it's quite a shift, I think, from previous years. Why do you think that is? What's different?
I think nationally we've seen trends of families kind of keeping students closer to home. That's part of it with COVID. So there's a COVID component to this. But on the flip side of this is it's an initiative. It's an effort that we have, at least since I arrived, a little over a year and a half ago, coming up now on 2 years. We've had an effort to increase our transfer enrollment. And Terry Durbin, another St. Ben's alum, who's our transfer counselor, again too, I've tapped her on the shoulder and asked her to answer the bell and step up and help us with enrolling more transfer students, and she's done that. So part of it is a planned effort where we still have a lot of low-hanging fruit to capture. But the other part is there is, again, a little bit of a COVID component that I think is playing a part of that in this year.
I want to comment on some data that you just shared, I think, with Cabinet yesterday and heard it discussed again today. You had received a report from the Minnesota Private College Council, which provides lots of information to those of us who are in private institutions in the state about enrollment activities. And there was one data point that really struck me, and that was the enrollment of men and women at the Minnesota private colleges are just about equal, right? But say more about that data point. I mean, how we've lost, there are fewer women enrolling in private education, private higher education in Minnesota. Say more about that data point and what that means for us.
Yeah, this year, amongst all 17 Minnesota private colleges and universities, enrollment is down about 5%. It had been on May 1st, which was the traditional deadline date, it had been down 14%. So there was some ground made up. We made up quite a bit of ground from May to June. But that almost 5% decrease is really, all of it is in women enrollments across all schools. There's very few schools that are up in women's enrollment this year compared to last year. And
so women are not enrolling in private higher education in Minnesota like they used to.
Correct. And there's probably a myriad of different reasons for that, but one in particular that we just know has an influence is the University of Minnesota has become much more aggressive in their marketing, in how they're positioning themselves really as a small school. I mean, it's interesting when we talk to high school guidance counselors that they'll say when the U rep comes in, the thing they say sounds so different than they did maybe a decade ago about how they tell themselves. Their graduation rates have gotten a lot better. The things that we used to be able to, say we're extremely different in this way, that gap has closed or disappeared. So we need to lean into and explore ways that we position ourselves against the U, and we've done great work in that over the course of this past year in looking at how we sell the institution.
That makes me want to jump to a question that really relates to the people listening this evening, our alumni and donors and friends. I think everybody listening tonight wants to help us make a big difference in our enrollment and student recruitment. And so as you think about what our alums and friends could be doing to really make it possible for more young women to enroll at St. Ben's, what are the key things you would ask of our alums?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, obviously, your continued support of the annual fund and scholarship donations. I mean, closing the gap, especially with our lower income families, is really important. We're down in that demographic and have been for the past couple of years in that very high need family demographic. So, the annual fund scholarships. We launched an enrollment partners program this past year. When I was giving some thought to, again, figuring this would come up tonight in the conversation, there's a few that I just want to take time to mention. I don't know if they're on the call or not tonight, but, Annie Mccarney has been phenomenal. She was selected by admissions this year as the volunteer we love. I mean, she's been involved in our card writing events, our Twin Cities reception. She's been a great help at Cathedral High School, main feeder school for us locally in St. Cloud. Maria Burnham, it wouldn't surprise me if Maria is not listening, but I love Maria. can't wait to give her a hug again when this is all done.
Yeah.
But her work, I mean, she's touched, numerous aspects of students working in Sauk Rapids. She's been able to help us make connections there.
And just for the audience, Maria is also the president of our alumni, the Bennie Alumnae Association. So she plays an important role across the board.
Yeah, for sure. And Teresa Wenner is another one. She's a young alum. She's in the doctoral program at Creighton University in physical therapy. And she's always answered the bell when we have a student interested in physical therapy. We connect them with her, and she's able to talk to those students about the physical therapy path she took from St. Ben's to Creighton and graduate school. So that partner program, again, there's a link online through the alum page where you can basically let us know you're interested in helping us, and
we'll make sure when we send out, excuse me, when we send out the evaluation after this episode, we'll include that information, a link to the place where if you want to become one of our enrollment partners, you could really make a big difference to St. Ben's and to our women. So thank you for that. Your work, just the day-to-day work of enrollment has changed so much because of the pandemic. And when you think about St. Ben's, one of the things that you think about is just our highly personal kind of approach to teaching and learning, and really that strong sense of community that we enjoy on the St. Ben's campus, and that our alums tell us all the time, is something that they really value. So, as you do traditionally, I think as you do your enrollment work, those, in-person visits with the students and the parents, and the overnight stays that happen on campus and campus visits, all of that are such an important way to demonstrate the community and the personal touch, right? So you can't do that now these days. We haven't been able to do that. So how do you go about building that sense of personal connection and sense of community when you can't do these in-person visits?
Yeah, it was a challenge. I will say that we did open up to individual visits last week. So Bennie Nation, if you know of high school students that want to come and visit, send them our way. But this is where I get to just brag about my team again. We pivoted quickly, and I always think of March 13th, March 13th sticks in my head as the pivot day. We, from March 13th till about June 1st, engaged in about 60 webinars that engaged over 1,200 students. These are, group visit opportunities. They were faculty-led sessions for programs. They were individual, virtual visits that were set up. The team ran with it. Pivoted quick, and the feedback we had from students is, I could feel the community through the Zoom call.
Wow.
and that's telling. We had shot new drone footage of the campuses and published a new campus overview that if you haven't seen them, that's maybe a link we can get out to Cathy.
We'll include that, definitely.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Just shows the campus so well. A 360 virtual tour where you can actually walk into a campus lab or a choir practice or a volleyball game and look around at what the environment is like. Tom Voller-Burdan, Sarah Simpson, Mary Rubel, that team that grabbed the virtual experience, Tony Amelise, another one. They grabbed it, they ran with it. And when we have families, like I mentioned, say, you can feel the community through the call, through the Zoom call, I knew we nailed it. And that's just a real testament to the community. So
do you think there's any, is there some of the practices that you've had to adopt because of social distancing and stay-at-home orders? Do you think some of that will stay on even when we are able to be face-to-face more?
The social distancing piece, that's an interesting angle. I haven't given the social distance piece. I think we'll be much happier to not have to be social distance.
Right. But some of the ways that you've adapted to that, will you keep on doing? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the virtual piece, Kathy, is the big piece of this. We will be able to use our virtual technology that we've had to utilize for all of these webinars and visits now to have a much further and deeper reach than we've had before, right? We can't travel to every high school in the country for a variety of different reasons, but now we can get into many more high schools than we have before, or with students outside of maybe our local travel area, to engage them and maybe entice them then to make that trip and fly in and come and see us. So yeah, that virtual, our need to shift the virtual certainly shifts the way we do things ongoing, and the reach that we'll have.
Well, I'm encouraging everybody out there, when you get the assessment evaluation piece, click on those links, because the virtual tours and the drone footage, it's really spectacular. And especially if you haven't been back to campus recently, it will be probably pretty illuminating. So I want to shift now to talk about our new president, interim president. We're looking forward to welcoming Lori Heyman to St. Ben's on July 1st as our interim president. She brings with her some pretty significant experience in student development and enrollment work. And so I'm wondering, how do you think that might have an effect on the work that we're doing in enrollment?
Yeah, and before I talk about Lori and my excitement of working with her, I'd be remiss if I didn't just thank Mary Hinton for her leadership and let her know, if she happens to be on tonight, how much we'll miss having her leadership on campus. Really, truly one of the most inspirational leaders I've ever been around. But how blessed we all are to have Lori be joining us. I've had the opportunity to walk around campus with Lori about 2 weeks ago, and her background in enrollment and in student development, mirrors my current experience in enrollment, and I've had previous experience in student development as well. So she speaks my language. We speak each other's language, and she brings a passion, a strength, a knowledge base that's intoxicating when you're around her. And I can't wait to dig in with her and have her look at the things we've been doing, the things we've been implementing since I arrived with a fresh set of eyes to St. Ben's and St. John's a couple of years ago, to help us think about things differently, to push us to continue to be creative. So she's phenomenal. I'm thrilled she's going to be with us, and just really, like I said, really excited for her and I to be able to sit down and dig in together and explore opportunities.
Well, she's going to be with us on July 1st, actually her very first official day as interim president. She'll be taking part in our final St. Ben's at Home episode in the series. So I encourage all of you to listen in for that. And I'm sure that part of what we'll be talking about is her experience in enrollment and her thoughts about what's going ahead. So mark July 1st on your calendars, everyone.
She'll be way better than me. I'll just let you know that right now. So.
It'll be a great compliment to you. So one of the things not everyone may be aware of is that you, as head of marketing and enrollment management, it's a joint position. So you recruit students for both St. Ben's and St. John's. And I'm wondering, there's obviously differentiation between the two. One is a college for women, one is a college for men. But are there other ways you sort of differentiate between the two schools, or really do you? Is it more of a better together kind of approach? How do you approach that in your marketing for enrollment?
Yeah, we're again leaning into the two college approach in our new marketing materials that we've been creating and sending out now for this next incoming class, has leaned into this two college aspect. It's really our most unique aspect. So so college squared is kind of the theme here, and then we play off of that. Faith squared, community squared, connection squared. So, we punch way above our weight, and we're much stronger places together. So we do lean into that, Kathy. And there's an aspect of that I found in my almost 2 years now of being at St. Ben's and St. John's, where I think I've recognized and realized that, students are recruited to and are drawn to St. Ben's and St. John's, but then they graduate a Bennie or they graduate a Johnny.
Right.
So there's an evolution that happens, but during the recruitment process, I think, what we've realized and continue to strengthen is that there are women-specific messaging that we can drop into our communication cadences, and male-specific messages that we can drop in at the right times to augment that college squared notion. So, women buy a little differently than men. So
I've heard you say that before. What do you mean when you say that? And what are they buying when they buy St. Ben's?
Well, it's important, and we talk a lot about this with our team. It's important to identify exactly what are the buying motives. Everybody has different buying motives. Some, are really connected to their program and major. So, identifying that, faculty being an important first connection or early connection for them to make, really important. For some, it's the ability to continue doing a sport that they love. So, they want to play fast pitch and be on that softball diamond. So, getting them connected there. When I say women buy differently than men, I think in my, 25, 26 years of experience in doing this, women typically are on things a little earlier. So the cadence and timing of the messages with women look a little different than men. They respond differently to emotional, what I would call emotionally charged messages than men do. I've watched my own children kind of consume this as well. I've got a son who just graduated from college, and then Emma, and I've got a high school student as well who'll be going through this process in about a year or so, which blows my mind that my youngest is going to be looking at schools. But
empty nesting isn't all bad. I'm just going to tell you.
Yeah, well, Melissa and I are ready to have our fun too, believe me. But I watched my son look at schools, and he would walk away from that experience saying, they've got a soccer field on top of a parking garage. That's awesome. Okay. And then I've watched my daughter watch the Illuminating Lives videos that you all put together that we utilized in enrollment, and be drawn to these wonderfully strong, leading women with great stories, and then their passion about St. Ben's just reaches through the screen and grabs you by the shirt. There's a different response there. So we try to be mindful of that in our messaging and our cadence.
So, all right, what I want you to do now is to pretend that all of us listening, me and everybody listening here, are high school students, high school women. And we're thinking about coming to St. Ben's. What's your elevator pitch to us?
Yeah, the short elevator pitch, and then I'll share a story that I share with prospective students and families, Kathy. But, I always say that, if you're looking for a place that's going to allow you to grow as a young woman or a young man, if we're talking to St. John's students, and reach places in your personal and professional life that you never really thought possible, or you didn't even know existed within you, where you can do that in St. Ben's case at a college for women, but have a co-ed experience, you found the right place. That's the short story. But Kathy, when I talk about St. Ben's and St. John's to prospective students and families, I tell a story. And that happened during my first year at St. Ben's and St. John's. It was a relatively slow sports day. And I'm a channel surfer. I'm always, flipping to what's next on TV. And I stumbled on, of all things, an equestrian event. Now, I know nothing about equestrian. I know there's horses, they jump over things. That's about it. It was obvious that the person interviewing the winning rider knew about as much as I did. And the person asked the rider, the interviewer asked the rider, how do you get the horse to do those things? And the answer hit me like a ton of bricks and helped me, I think, express what I think is so special about St. Ben's and St. John's. And the rider said, it's simple. I reach into my chest and I pull out my heart and I throw the heart over the obstacle. And the horse senses my urgency to catch up to my heart and jumps the obstacle without hesitation. And I thought, what a beautiful metaphor for, I think, what we do at St. Ben's and St. John's. We understand that students are giving us their heart and want us to help them catch up to their hopes and dreams. And as parents, they're giving us a little bit of their heart and entrusting us to that. And so it's not really eloquent to be like we're the horse, right?
Horses are beautiful, they're strong.
Yeah, right. But that's, I think, for me, it helped me, I think, express what makes St. Ben's and St. John's different than any place I've ever been before or that I've sold before, and why I'm thrilled that one of my children, at least one of my children, maybe my youngest as well, may end up over at St. John's. It makes me so happy to know that she's getting to experience that. So, so that's a little bit more than an elevator speech, but
but that is really helpful. It sort of makes me think too about Bennies in general. And I know Bennies well enough to know that there's no such thing as a typical Bennie, because these are women who, they're out there, as we say, we educate women to think critically, lead courageously, advocate passionately, and they're doing that in countless different ways in the world. So knowing that there's no such thing as a typical Bennie, how would you describe the women who choose St. Ben's? Do those young women have some characteristics in common?
Yeah, they do. And it's awesome to work for them. I would say, what I love about our Bennies is that they come to us, maybe having not really fully been encouraged or empowered to let their light completely shine. We get to dust the edges. We get to give that extra encouragement or that nudge. But they're passionate. They're leaders. They want better for themselves and their world around them. We get to read their applications. We get to see, their accomplishments and what they've done so far. And it's awe-inspiring. I was never anywhere near that.
Oh, I know.
or that focused. But we get to dust the edges, and when they walk across that stage at commencement, boy, their light's shining bright. So
something happens. Something very distinctive happens,
right.
And I happen to know that there is one such young Bennie, I think, near you right now. Is that?
Well, she's probably listening in the other room. So
she should make an appearance. So Nate has alluded to the fact that he has a daughter at St. Ben's, Emma. Emma's just finished her first year on campus, and I thought it'd be fun if she pops in, she can say hi, and we can meet her. But as we wait for that, I would love to hear from you, Nate. What has it been like to watch Emma go through the St. Ben's experience?
Well, now you're going to break out the rough, tough cream puff in me, Kathy. And she happens to walk in right as I have to say this.
Okay, so let's say hi to Emma.
She can sit on my knee as we talk about this. But I think, for me, I love my boys. I got 2 boys, but there's something always about my Emma, and she knows it, and so do my boys. But what I'll point to one specific thing for me that I knew that everything was going to be okay. And that was Emma had a group of her friends over for dinner before a hockey game, maybe, 2-3 months into our time at St. Ben's. And I remember Melissa, my wife, and I sitting at the kitchen table while they were in the dining room. And it was awesome to witness lifelong friendships forming right in front of us.
Really?
The support she feels, not only from her friend group, but her faculty, the staff. She's never gone a moment where she said somebody's not willing to step up and help. She's empowered to make the world a better place. And that's what you want for your kids. So, yeah, I got to stop because I'm going to get all emotional.
Well, I thought it'd be fun for everybody to have a chance to meet Emma, at least in this virtual environment. So we were lucky in advancement to have Emma work as part of our student workers last summer, and we miss her. So anyway, it's great to have you at St. Ben's, Emma.
Thank you. I'm happy to be there.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Nate, for letting us.
Yeah, no, you bet.
That's great. One other question really from you personally before we open things up to the questions from the audience, but we're colleagues on the president's cabinet, and you are one of only two men on the cabinet. The rest of the cabinet are women. And I'm wondering if working at a college for women has in any way changed your leadership style or your work style, anything about that? Has it had an impact in that way for you personally?
Yes. And I'll start too. I was sharing this story, a while back with some old colleagues of mine, but I once had an old colleague, Amy Dobson, female colleague of mine, say, Nate, you're more like a woman than a man. And I thought that was a great compliment, actually. Again, I had no issues with her saying that. But, again, I think over time, and especially it's been, I think, enlightened in the time when I've been at St. Ben's, is that when you sit in a room at the opening dinner and you're maybe one or two men in a room of hundreds of strong, confident, intelligent women, when you're in a meeting and you look at a Zoom screen or you're in person and you're one of the only men in the room, that hasn't happened much for me in my career. I think there's an increased level of responsibility and understanding that I bring to my work, making sure that I hold myself accountable to make sure that I think not about myself, my white maleness in the center, and my own biases and all of those things. But I get to look around the room on a daily basis and learn from great leaders where, again, if I'm in other environments, I don't always get that perspective. Right. So, yeah, it's changed me. It's changed, my outlook on how I do my work. It's changed my outlook as a leader. Again, it's the Benedictine values have been so, important in the work that I do. And, when there's days that I think my job or my life is really, really difficult, I draw strength from the sisters. I honestly do. I think about, the grit and determination of those women to create a thing as beautiful as St. Ben's, and what they needed to do, and what they went through to get to that point. And then I tell myself to suck it up and get over it and get on with it. Right. So it's a life-changing place for our students. But in a short time, it's been a life-changing place for me as well. And I love it.
That's great, Nate. Before we open it up to the audience for their questions, we have a traditional last question. And I'm going to ask you now. It's a very hard one.
Yeah.
Benny bars or chocolate lava cake?
Yeah. Well, listening to the other ones, I've heard people's responses. And again, but you can tell by my round face, both.
I'm with you on that.
Both, it's both.
Okay, great. So this time we would like to open it up for your questions. So Amy, do we have any questions submitted by the audience?
Yes, we do. Our first question, Nate, is how is financial aid distributed and how has COVID-19 changed the financial aid picture, if it has?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we work, obviously with our CFOs in the financial aid office on the disbursement of about $45 million worth of aid. The vast majority of that aid is unfunded aid, so it really is just a discount. It's a takeaway from the revenue that we're bringing in, right? So we work with a third-party vendor that helps us break out our class into estimated family contributions. So there's a financial component, family financial component, and an academic component. So we spread our students amongst this financial aid matrix, and then kind of determine how we're going to disperse that money. And we try to disperse it out to try to meet the needs of our population. So it's a complicated, we would need a whole nother evening to kind of get through it all, but has COVID changed the way we're doing some of that? Yeah, we've had to be really, really mindful and receptive of families that have been impacted and which demographic of families have been impacted disproportionately by COVID. So we've made a lot of adjustments on the fly this year. We've augmented some awards for families, knowing that it was the only way that they were going to be able to make it a reality. And I think we're going to continue to have to do that through the summer because, this if there's anything that has been predictable about this COVID-19 world we're living in right now is that it's unpredictable. So we'll continue to monitor that.
Great. Amy, any other questions?
Yes, this one's from Pat Pickett, and he asks, has there been a concerted effort to introduce the Somalian community to St. Ben's?
Yes, part of, I appreciate that question, Pat. I mean, we've engaged our Central Minnesota team that kind of focuses on strategy specifically for Central Minnesota, has begun conversations with the Somali community to discuss specific strategies and efforts to work with the Somali population. We've got a lot of work yet to do to make that a reality, but absolutely. And I think, some of our ongoing look at programming and diversity of programming will assist in those efforts as well.
Mm-hmm. I know our campus ministry has had a strong focus on like interfaith focus. So it's part of that is opening them, the faith experience up, not only to, those from the Catholic or Catholic and Benedictine tradition, but also Muslims and Jews and, others as well.
Right.
Amy, other questions?
Yes, our next question is, given all that has happened in Minnesota and the nation, does having a BA degree matter? And if so, why?
Yeah, boy, you might be a prospective student parent with that question, right? Yeah, we addressed that really specifically in an awful lot of some great bragging rights that we've heard from, again, others that are doing surveys, things like Georgetown University just did a study on return on investment and salary over the timeline of a career. And, it clearly shows that St. Ben's impact in that, I mean, being in the top 5 of universities within the state of Minnesota, demonstrates the power of that degree, the BA degree, the ability to shift and pivot within jobs and careers and things. Again, there's many, many stories talking about that, but that's at the core of what families are looking for and what parents of students are looking for, specifically when we survey too, the ability to get a job, ranks number 1. So, but our graduates, next week, I think Angie Schmidt will be on and works in our career development office, our XPD office. And, we partner very closely with them in helping students and families understand the value of that degree and what the value of that over time, not only in salary, but just overall engagement within community and things. So absolutely.
And it's far beyond that first job, right? It's for a whole career and maybe jobs that haven't even been invented yet.
That's right.
There's also been, of course, research done just during this pandemic that would indicate that those without college degrees have been disproportionately negatively affected during the pandemic. So even our most recent immediate experience demonstrates the value of having a college degree.
Right.
Amy, other questions?
Yes. Is there a difference in enrollment at SJU and CSB for the currently enrolled class of 2024?
I guess a difference in enrollment, if you're meaning like numbers and things along those lines, actually the total enrollment numbers are coming in pretty similar as far as overall numbers. So it's an equal amount of students. The demographic and the makeup of the class, shifts slightly between the two schools. I mean, we're always looking at, geographical region, socioeconomic background, ethnic backgrounds, things along those lines. And there are subtle differences, but, largely for the most part, it's not as if, St. Ben's is enrolling 60% of its students from Minnesota, and St. John's is 90%. I mean, that's not the case. They're actually usually within maybe 5 percentage points of each other on either side. So there are differences, but not wildly, divergent differences between the population.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers the question.
Great. Amy.
I think you touched on this a little bit, Nate, but maybe you can go into it a little bit more. Is how has COVID-19 impacted returning students who are out of state or international students?
Yeah, the out of state students, in particular, there's concerns about the travel and making it back. I would say it's not so much just out of state students, but it's just students overall. If families have been impacted, lost a job or other things, we've been receiving calls and appeals and concerns about making up some of that difference. And again, we're here to help in that regard. We're doing what we can to help families with funds that either have been made available, or again emergency funds and other funds that have been that have been generated since this all hit. International students, we're hearing concerns about the COVID situation within the States. They're watching media and hearing stories about cases, and quite frankly, in some cases, families are actually more concerned about sending their child to the United States than keeping them in country, because wherever country that they're in, just think of the Bahamas as an example, the cases there aren't nearly as high, as the U.S. So, certainly our trend lines in Minnesota have been very helpful recently in demonstrating that, again, it's not, in some parts of the country it may be more severe than where we're at, but the concerns with COVID, again, travel restrictions, many U.S. embassies have been closed, are expected now to open back up, but for those students to be able to get visas to enter into country, that's right now we're watching really closely. But again, our block schedule and how we've set that up allow for some flexibility there, where if we need to do, those students need to do some online classes and then will be joining us, they'll be able to do that. So all of these ripple effects certainly have reverberated through the process this year. And I think all of us are longing for the days in which we can call whatever the new normal is going to be as it relates to this pandemic, for us to get through it. But those are some ways, I think, in which those populations in particular, but all students for the most part, are being impacted.
Nate shared this morning that in conversations with a student from the Bahamas, and the Bahamas, of course, are the largest, generator of international student enrollment for us. The students, the first time that they could get an appointment to discuss a visa was in September 3rd, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that, shows you just the backlog of, how long it's taking some of our international students to just get the necessary documents and authorizations to get back into the country. But as Nate pointed out, it's helpful to be in a block system, because that student can certainly take that class online, be enrolled, even if they're not able to come till later in September.
Right.
Any more questions, Amy?
Yes. Colleen asks, are there any alumni recruiting incentives?
Alumni can you, I mentioned, you cut out there, Amy. Can you just make mention of them?
Yep, sorry about that. Are there any alumni recruiting incentives?
Yeah, last year we actually implemented an alumni scholarship program, in which students that are referred by an alum will get $1,000 a year scholarship. So $4,000 over the 4 years. So again, another link that we can send out, or again, where I work. So you can find me on the website. If you refer a student, it's a form you can fill out, or the student can get you a link to send and get to us. As long as you're attached to that student, then that scholarship will be awarded. And that's a change. We used to just do that for legacy students, but we expanded that out, knowing, again, just the power of the Alumni Network, the Bennie Network, we didn't want to limit it to just legacy students. So absolutely. And those are unlimited for you. So if you can go track down any and everybody that you know who may have college age students, you can refer them to either St. Ben's or St. John's, and they'll get that award, and that'll be on top of other merit awards and scholarships that they get.
That's great. Amy, other questions from the audience?
Yes. Are you seeing any trends in the kinds of majors Bennies are looking for?
Yeah, by far and away, our largest major, and it really equates to about 20% of our accepted students this year, is nursing. Nursing tends to be a tremendously strong pillar for us. And, you know, we expanded the amount of spots in our nursing program this year because we were really over enrolling in that program. And some students were flowing to other majors, but many of them were looking in greater frequency to transfer when they weren't getting a spot in the program. So expanding those spots really has allowed us to retain more students going into the nursing program. So nursing by far and away is number one. The second largest declared based on their application is undecided. You know, we have a lot of students that are coming to us with some interest, but they don't really know. And again, you know, some of our recruitment and marketing strategies are around helping those students find a home with us. I mean, our curriculum is tailor-made to allow students to find what they want to do. And I always like to say there's an awful lot of students that are really undecided. They just don't list it. But undecided is two. Psychology, very popular. Business, another very popular major. So those are some of the larger programs, you know, trend lines and things along those lines. Health science programs, and we're doing some great work with academic affairs right now to bundle our health science programs into really an arsenal of programs that students can choose from, rather than trying to recruit to individual programs. You know, for every student that comes up and says, I want to be a nursing major, there's probably 3 or 4 that come up saying something in the sciences. So, you know, we've looked at how we market that, but that's a growing population, those health science programs.
What are some of the new, like, minors, you know, majors, new programs that we have that we've been responding to student demand, or, you know, prospective student demand?
Yeah, exercise science is one at the major level. I mean, that's again in that arsenal of health science programs, and works really, really nicely with our strong athletic programs. Again, that's just an interest a lot of students will go into. Pre-professional programs, pre-occupational therapy, physical therapy. Again, we prepare our students so well for graduate school and that work beyond. I mean, some of the graduate schools and programs and things our graduate students are doing, again, just blow you away when you see where they land and what they're doing. Data analytics minor, really nice addition when we think in really any profession, the amount of time you spend looking at spreadsheets and data and work that you're doing. So, you know, those are a couple that jump to mind. You know, we're talking, you know, about you know, maybe a doctorate in nurse practitioner program, again, looking at different populations as far as add-ons, and a myriad of others that we're just really early on in development and talking about. So the faculty and Richard Ice and Barb May and faculty leadership have been phenomenal and being partners in our enrollment planning process to help us think and identify programs that'll be attractive to students.
That's great. Thank you, Nate. Amy, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, I think we have time for one more question. And I think this is coming from someone who must know you, Nate. It is, how is it living in the middle of Minnesota Viking country as a diehard Green Bay Packers fan?
Oh, good Lord. Well, the good part about being at St. Ben's and St. John's is that there's the evil empire in the Twin Cities, a nice school we like to always compete with. University of St. Thomas is also purple. So there's no possibility of me having any stitch of purple in my wardrobe. I'll say this, I spent, you know, the better part of almost 5 decades of my life, you know, walking around stores in Wisconsin on a Sunday game day. And whenever I would see a Vikings jersey, I would look at the person like, what in the world are you doing wearing that Vikings jersey? Now I'm the person in Colburn's on a Sunday afternoon wearing the Packer jersey, and I've got all the Viking fans giving me that same look like, what in the world, did you lose a bet or something? So it's been fun, especially with my staff. And again, I'm slowly trying to win them all over so I can surround myself with more cheeseheads. So yeah, so it's a challenge, but we're making it. But I'm always good wearing Bennie red and supporting the Bennies. So that's that we never have to worry about that.
We can get behind that 100%. So I think that's all the time we have this evening. Nate, I want to say thank you for taking time to be with us and to talk about your work at Enrollment and some of the really exciting things that are happening, even in the midst of these really challenging times. Thanks to all of you who are watching, participating with us this evening. We really appreciate having you engage with leadership at the college to learn more about what's going on and how you can be involved in our work. Nate and I are going to be logging off right now, but I invite you to stay on where you'll hear some more details and information about tonight's episode, as well as future episodes of St. Ben's at Home. So thank you and good night from Nate and I.
Thank you again, Nate and Kathy, for your time this evening. Audience, you can share additional questions or comments on tonight's episode through the evaluation form that will be emailed to you by the Alumni Relations team. The next episode in our St. Ben's at Home series will be held next Wednesday, June 24th at 7 p.m., featuring Angie Schmidt-Whitney, Executive Director of Experience and Professional Development. We hope that you will join us, and please invite your Bennie friends as well. You can find additional details about the St. Ben's at Home series on csbalumni.com/events page. Thank you all for attending.